Hey, first of all, I have to downvote that just because I have to get it to 69, so it's nothing against her. It's just, you know, I just have to do that. If it was getting it to 420, I would do it too. Anyway, how's this for title? Comicsgate Conman, World-Class BSers, EVS, Cyberfrog, the Yoko Ono of Comicsgate. This video, as many of my videos, come out a little more salty than intended. So if you're a huge fan of EVS, World-Class BSers, or Yoko Ono here, skip the video. Just click something else. You can click the links to support the channel or donate art. Please, someone tell Mike to stop sending me nudes of Doug TenNapel. In fact, how did Mike get them? Anyway, how would the Comicsgate community handle a scam? As everyone knows, Jeff at World-Class BSers had a book with shipping and printing problems. And this is just a matter of opinion, but from what I saw of Stealing Solo, the art was mediocre. But it also seemed like the background images were absent. This is a stylistic choice, I understand that, but it just looked cheap and lazy to me. I think you have to have an editor look at this and hand it off to someone who can put in backgrounds. But I assume that when people bought the book, they saw the art style and were okay with it. I went to the Indiegogo, and all there is a video. I didn't see any art other than the cover, and that is a huge red flag. If you don't see the art, move on. Don't back a project without sample art. Then I noticed that it was only 32 pages. That is too short for a graphic novel. It's like $20 plus $10 shipping for 32 pages. That's crazy. Just looking at the Indiegogo page, I'm noticing a lot of red flags. There's no, I mean, I could show the page in the background, but this is much nicer. There's no art. The artists aren't listed. So does that mean Jeff is doing it all himself? The pens, colors, and lettering, that is way too much for one guy to do. The idea that people would buy a comic book without seeing the art, well, that's on the buyer. Just because the guy seems like a nice guy, and he does, and he has a good show, that's no reason to spend $30 without seeing several pages of the art. Part of the issue is that his comic was sold when Comicsgate was at the peak of a buying frenzy. People would go on EVS's show and sell books without any scrutiny. That he raised $50,000 all without showing any art is pretty impressive. It says that people really trusted him, or EVS, and it's great that people are pumped up about Comicsgate, but it's still up to you to examine the product. You want to know how many pages, who's doing the pencils, pens, colors, lettering, who's the editor, and who's doing the cover, and you have to see several sample pages. Comicsgate is, or was, great, but not everyone is a white hat. Or instead of a black hat, it's probably more fair to say that a lot of people either don't know what they're doing or their art isn't ready for a $25 comic. That's the main problem I see with these comics. The artist needs a year of drawing faces and bodies. From what I've seen, that is where the amateur artists get into trouble. But I guess that is a matter of preference. If you think that the comic is worth $30 or $35, that's up to you. A lot of these first-time comic creators are artists, and artists are not known for their pragmatism. Their heads are full of fluff and nonsense, bunnies and robot frogs, which leads us to another Comicsgate problem. Poor planning leads to piss-poor performance. Late campaigns. There are a couple of issues here. Let's take Ethan Van Sciver's Cyberfrog as an example. Cyberfrog was very, very late, and the print quality was substandard. Some people say it looked cheap, like he skimped out on the printing to line his pockets with the money of gullible suckers. But why was Cyberfrog so late? We couldn't help but notice that EVS spent hours per day on Twitter. Then he spent hours on YouTube shilling for super chats. His customers felt ripped off, that they felt that if they had paid someone to produce a book, he shouldn't be spending half the day on YouTube and Twitter. They felt like EVS was nothing more than a slick-talking con man. I have to admit that I was surprised when I saw how much time he spent on YouTube, but then I saw the thousands of dollars he was making on Super Chats, and I realized the scam. Once he raised the money for Cyberfrog, he did go to work on it like everyone expected, but he spent hours on social media making money hand over fist. He didn't work full-time on Cyberfrog because YouTube was bringing in a lot of money. He knew that very few people were going to refund the comic, and there was no way he wasn't going to fleece super chats from suckers, I mean fans. So some people mentioned, hey, EVS, shouldn't you be working on the book that we paid you for? But coincidentally, EVS had a totally organic group of fans called War Campaign, who would attack and humiliate any customers that raised doubts. In fact, one of them is being investigated by the district attorney's office for stalking. Gee, Ethan, I thought this was about comic books. War Campaign, with EVS's support, has stalked and harassed Ethan's, quote, enemies, unquote, for a year, just because they wondered why the book was so late. Pretty soon, people learned that Ethan had a very vicious side when he didn't get his way. Someone told me that they thought Ethan had narcissistic personality disorder. Now, I am no proctologist, but I can see that. Something you see with narcissistic people is they have large circles of friends, but they have high friend turnover. And that is something you will notice with EVS. Like everyone says, when you're fighting with over a dozen people, maybe you're just an asshole. People saw EVS raking in money on YouTube instead of working on the book. They started to feel like maybe EVS was a bit greedy. You want to know when the expected delivery date will be. But the next thing we should be asking them is, hey, what's your work schedule like? You're a YouTuber. How many hours will you be spending on YouTube and Twitter? How many hours will you be spending actually working on the book? You want firm answers here. Don't let EVS or anyone worm their way out of it. If they do a daily live stream, that's a huge time commitment. Are they going to limit their YouTube to once or twice a week? If you don't get firm answers, don't back the project. Now, I'm not saying don't support them. If you like their content, just give them $1 or $2 on Patreon. You don't have to waste $35. Cyberfrog was, and I want to thank people who have donated to my PayPal. It's very generous of you, but you don't need to donate more than like $1 or $2. That's all I really deserve. Anyway, Cyberfrog was really late, not because EVS was working drawing frogs, but because he was spending 4 to 6 hours a day doing live streams. He would do his own 3+ hour show, then he'd do hours on other people's shows. He spent time on Twitter. Cyberfrog was just a part-time job to him. That's when a lot of people kind of got a funny feeling about EVS, that he was a little bit shady. They knew that they were going to get the comic, but they also knew that EVS wasn't going to pass on hundreds of thousands of dollars from YouTube. It changed everyone's perspective on EVS. There needs to be way more accountability in Comicsgate. Maybe IndieCron could keep track of late campaigns, and when the second campaign comes out, they could flag campaigns that had prior problems with being late or customer complaints. When Rainbow Brute comes out, there should be a warning that mentions that Cyberfrog was a year late and had some poor print quality issues and was short in its page count. If you paid for an 88-page comic, nice dog whistle, Ethan, and got a 48-page comic plus filler, then you have a right to complain. Maybe IndieCron should have a message board where people could rate their experiences with the seller. With Cyberfrog, it was late, had quality issues, and was short in page count. But you did see sample pages before you bought it, and the art was good. I should say it was great. It is great. And it was very readable. Even if some people say the font was a poor choice and the text boxes made it difficult to read, whatever. That kind of stuff will be improved in the second book. Some of these complaints I think we can overlook a bit. A first-time book is not going to be as polished as the third-time book. There's just no way around that. An individual seller doesn't have the experience or resources of Marvel or DC. And to be fair, Marvel and DC are not what they used to be. They are not very good in terms of quality control. They hire pretty young girls as editors who can't spell or understand the rules of grammar. But they do provide lunchtime. I'll edit that out. I'll say they bring knee pads to work and leave it at that. With Stealing Solo, it was a mess from the start. There were tons of red flags that the customers ignored, and nobody in Comicsgate spoke up and said, hey, we need to see the art first before we have you on to sell the book. But everyone in Comicsgate is too scared of EVS and War Campaign to raise these very important questions. When people like The Hut or Preston Poulter, the guy who wrote White Lily, mention it, EVS has War Campaign attack them. I hear a lot of EVS's fanboys talk about anti-Comicsgate. I don't think these guys are anti-Comicsgate, but they are anti-grifter. I just define Comicsgate as social justice warrior free independent comics. So no, they or me are not against that. SJWs at Marvel are misandrist and anti-people of the light. So it's a straw man argument that EVS and his acolytes are using. They aren't anti-Comicsgate, but they want quality comics that are on time. That isn't an unreasonable request. Comicsgate started by calling out crappy comics and jerk-off creators and did things right. Oh, Zach, you boy, did things right. He made good comics, and he respected the customers. EVS was a totally different experience. EVS is a jerk. Hey, I don't have a problem with that. I am also. But the difference is that I am not a jerk with the customers. Once someone becomes a customer, your relationship with them changes. Rule 1 is don't F your customer in the A. Don't take their money, promise to do something, then spend half the day on Twitter getting involved in pointless arguments about the most asinine stuff. Just get to work on your comic. Rule 2 is when your customer has some questions about why you aren't working on your comic, don't send your fan club to attack them for months on end or call them drug addicts or threaten them with homosexual struggle snuggles. There are hundreds of these weird photos or memes they're doing with dildos coming from War Campaign. They're really, really gay. Anyway, I hope Jeff just refunds everyone's money and sues the printer. Some of the printing errors are so weirdly bad, I wonder if there isn't some sort of digital editing and approval process. I don't know where the fault lies. A lot of it depends on what the contract says, what the four corners of the document say, and plus the standards and practices of the industry customs, that kind of thing. How a comic goes without packaging is a mystery to me. Where the fault lies will be determined by a court, unfortunately, because it's going to be very expensive. But it's the seller's duty to quickly make things right. I saw that his girlfriend, Yoko Ono, has been on Twitter and YouTube just screeching like an insane harpy about the comic book hut. She said that Jeff is a nice guy and that she is the evil one. So the hut made a good point. Then why is Jeff dating you? That raises all kinds of interesting questions. Anyway, like, comment, subscribe. You can send me email, biancazombie602@gmail.com. Click the links in the description to support the channel. Thanks to all those who have donated on Patreon, Coffee, and PayPal. Way more generous than I expected, and way more generous than I deserve. I definitely do not deserve. Keep it under like $3, under $3. Anything like $15 donations, way too much. Anyway, guys, thanks for listening, and I will see you all next episode.